Hello, my name is Patrick Morton, and this is my TESL final presentation. Today I'll be going over what PSYOP is, my personal lesson plan, which will include the subtopics of grade level subject and topic, language content objectives, key vocabulary and materials, higher order thinking questions. Then we will cover the sequence of activities, which will include an introduction and station work, and then finally a final reflection. So what is PSYOP? PSYOP literally means Sheltered Instruction Observation Protocol. I like to think of PSYOP as good teaching technique plus intentionally and strategically teaching the vocabulary behind the content. This works especially well for the ELL students. This is my PSYOP lesson plan that I developed. I chose to do it for a high school life skills classroom because I myself am a special education minor. The subject is language arts and the topic is synonyms and antonyms. One thing to also consider where I'm doing my student teaching, we do have English language learners in our life skills classroom. In a life skills classroom, the content objective is tricky because state law mandates that you have to base it off of their grade level TEKS, but it also dictates that at the level they're at, you develop lesson plans based off of their IEPs. So for situations like this, I use a content objective, which was the TEKS English 1C. Use relationships between words encountered and analogies to determine their meanings. For example, synonyms and antonyms. The language objectives I chose were: the student will present written reflections about Charlie Brown's feelings of getting rocks while trick-or-treating. 2. The student will use descriptive words to describe a pumpkin. And 3. The student will come up with one synonym and one antonym for half of the descriptive words that describe a pumpkin. I like the language objectives because it brings the content objective to their level. So, needless to say, the new vocabulary we'll be discussing is synonyms and antonyms. The supporting vocabulary that the students should know, even though they might not, are adjectives, nouns, verbs, pronouns, describing words, and a thesaurus. The materials you'll need are 4 jars, a bag of M&Ms, a bag of Starburst, a bag of gummy things, rocks to fill 1 jar, 3 pumpkins. It's The Great Pumpkin Charlie Brown by Charles M. Schulz, a thesaurus, and computers with internet access. Some of the higher order thinking questions that you might want to propose to the students are as follows. Why could synonyms improve the way you describe something? Why would antonyms matter? Why do you need to know them? And finally, how could synonyms and antonyms paint a better picture of something you're describing? Next, I will be talking about the sequence of activities. The introduction should take about 10 minutes, but depending on how well the students are understanding what a synonym and antonym is, you might have to adjust it based off of that. You'll start off by reading It's a Great Pumpkin Charlie Brown in a whole group setting. Then you'll ask the students which objects appear throughout the story. You need to be sure to point out pumpkins and candy if the students don't. And while you're talking about these objects in the books, go through and point them out. So after you do that, you'll go in and you'll explain synonyms are words that have similar meanings and antonyms are words that have opposite meanings. Together, the teacher and the students will rename the story using synonyms and antonyms. For example, synonyms. It's the fantastic pumpkin, Charlie Brown. Antonym. It's the tiny pumpkin, Charlie Brown. The adjective great is a describing word, therefore it's easy to come up with synonyms and antonyms for it. So let's look at the much more difficult word, pumpkin. And you know what? I can't think of a good one, so let's resort to the thesaurus to help us find it. And explain that the thesaurus is a book that helps us find synonyms for words. If needed, then you could go back and make a list of words from the themes that they were talking about at the beginning of the introduction and come up with whether or not they're nouns, verbs, adjectives, or pronouns, and then come up with synonyms and antonyms for those. Explain that today's activities will help the students find new and better words using synonyms and antonyms. Station work is set up as a structured learning environment, so every student will have 4 opportunities to share their knowledge. 1 in a small group setting with a teacher, 2nd in another small group setting with limited teacher involvement and maximum student involvement, which will be ran by a paraprofessional. 3rd, a computer station with a interactive program based on the content that we're covering. And 4th, at a task box station, which the student should be able to do 100% individually, which acts as a review for information from previous lessons. At the pumpkin station, there will be 3 pumpkins. The students will identify where pumpkins are growing, linking to the story where Linus was sitting in the pumpkin patch waiting on the great pumpkin. And also to broaden the students' background knowledge, you can also talk about a social studies lesson about farming, where food comes from. But back to our lesson. Ask them to contribute to a list of words that describe the pumpkin. Write the list on a board and then together come up with synonyms and antonyms for each word on that list. Then together with the students, start coming up with synonyms and antonyms for each word, and then progressively let them come up with more and more. Have the students write the list on their folders, and also you need to make sure that all the students can do it. You might have to write it for some students or use the dot tracing words so the students can still take part depending on their level. At the candy station, which will be ran by a paraprofessional, have 3 jars filled with candy: M&Ms, Gummy Things, and Starburst. You could link the lesson to math where they're working on estimating and have them estimate how much candy is in each jar to build background knowledge. Then review the part of the story where Charlie Brown went trick-or-treating for candy and ask, how do you think Charlie Brown felt about getting rocks instead of candy? Then take the candy away and put up the jar of rocks. Have the students journal their feelings. For some students, this could be one word, one sentence, one paragraph. Then the support staff will read the journal entries and highlight words that could have synonyms and antonyms, and have the students list the words and then look them up in the thesaurus. Alternatively, some groups may need help from the support staff to write how students would feel on the whiteboards and list possible synonyms and antonyms. At the computer station, the students are expected to go to ABC Yeah and go to the Halloween word search. That website is really neat because it actually tears the instruction to individual students, not just a concept. So it's really good for special education students. At the task box station, students may choose any task box within their level. The task box acts as a review of information they've already learned in previous lessons. So these task boxes are tiered based off of color. Green are the most advanced, orange indicates mid-level task, and yellow indicates the easiest task. The students should know where they're at, and in the lesson I actually list the students in my class in which boxes they should be using. At the end of the class, the teacher will check for understands of synonyms and antonyms by evaluating the students' descriptive words from the pumpkin and candy station. Check to see if the synonyms and antonyms are correct and make sense. Then make annotated notes of students that need remedial instruction. Reflection, final reflections. So one of my concerns was, how long is it going to take to read the book at the beginning of the class? How much time am I going to have to take reading the book? And then I came across this article from Hickman in 2004. And he suggests that teachers read the complete book over the course of 3 to 5 days, with a complete reading of the entire story to review the particularly important or challenging vocabulary on or day after the last passage is read and discussed. So with that in mind, if I were to do this lesson in real life, I would have read that book multiple times, as Hickman suggests, and conducted a story walk. That way the students would already be familiar with it, and accordingly the students wouldn't have to process as much information about the book and enable them to focus on the lesson content, which is synonyms and antonyms. One of the things I really like about this lesson is in its effective way to students to consider their current vocabulary, then encourage them to find new words that have similar meaning and opposite meanings, so that it just expands their vocabulary. Another thing I could have done to make my lesson better is actually have a task box that I could have used in either the pumpkin station or the candy station that I could then take to the task box station for later lessons. And a simple example of that one could be making it a matching exercise where you'll have a list of words and then they will have to match some cut up synonyms and antonyms to the supplied list of words. I think that would have really supported my lesson, not only in the short run, but in the long run as well. That's my final presentation, and thank you for your time.